My sister Jennifer totaled her third car drunk driving last month, and my parents bought her a brand new BMW the next week. When I asked for $500 to help with my medication copays, they told me that was my problem and maybe I should get better insurance. I need to get this out because I've been sitting on this rage for months now, and you guys are going to lose your minds when you hear the full story. Fair warning, this is going to be long because the level of favoritism in my family is absolutely unhinged. So here's the background. I'm 28, Jennifer is 25. I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition 3 years ago that requires monthly specialist visits and expensive medications. Even with decent insurance through my job, the copays add up to around $800 a month between prescriptions, lab work, and doctor visits. Not exactly chump change, but I manage it because what choice do I have? Meanwhile, Jennifer has been my parents' golden child since birth. She dropped out of college twice, has never held a job for more than 6 months, and has been living at home rent-free for the past 4 years. But according to my parents, Jennifer has real problems and needs their support. The drunk driving incident started 2 years ago. First time, she sideswiped 3 parked cars on her way home from some bar. My parents immediately hired her a lawyer who cost them $12,000 and somehow got her charges reduced to reckless driving. They took her keys away for exactly 2 weeks before giving them back because Jennifer was depressed about not having freedom. Second incident happened 8 months later. She rear-ended a family at a red light while texting and driving with alcohol in her system. The other car had kids in it, but thankfully nobody was seriously hurt. My parents dropped another $15,000 on legal fees, and somehow Jennifer walked away with just probation and community service she never completed. Did they take her car away? Nope. Instead, they paid for her to take an online defensive driving course that she bragged about cheating on. But this third incident, this is where it gets absolutely insane. 3 weeks ago, Jennifer was driving home from her friend's birthday party, completely wasted. She took a corner too fast and slammed straight into a concrete barrier, totaling her car completely. The impact was so hard it deployed all the airbags and cracked the windshield. She was lucky to walk away with just bruises. When the police arrived, her blood alcohol level was twice the legal limit. Twice. She got arrested on the spot and called my parents from jail, crying about how this was ruining her life and how she needed help immediately. So what did my loving parents do? They bailed her out within hours, hired the same expensive lawyer, again for another $20,000, and started talking about how Jennifer needed reliable transportation while dealing with this traumatic experience. I watched this whole circus unfold while calculating whether I could afford my next month's medication refills. My prescription costs had gone up because my insurance changed their formulary, meaning I was looking at an extra $300 out of pocket on top of my usual expenses. That's when I decided to ask my parents for help. Not a handout, not a gift, just a loan to cover the difference until I could adjust my budget. $500 from people who had just dropped $47,000 on my sister's legal problems over 2 years. I called my dad last Thursday evening and explained the situation. I told him about the insurance changes, showed him the prescription costs, and asked if they could spot me $500 just this once to cover the gap. His response? He laughed, actually laughed at me and said, maybe this would teach me to save money instead of wasting it on whatever I spend money on. When I pointed out that these were medical necessities, not optional expenses, he told me that was my problem and I should get better insurance or find a better job. My mom chimed in from the background saying I was being dramatic about some tests and that Jennifer had real problems I couldn't understand. Real problems. My sister, who has never paid rent, never held down a job, never faced consequences for anything in her entire adult life, has real problems. But my chronic disease that requires constant medical management is just me being dramatic. I tried explaining that these weren't optional treatments, that skipping medications could cause permanent damage, that this was literally my health we were talking about. My dad cut me off and said, real adults handle their own medical issues without running to mommy and daddy for money. The conversation ended with them hanging up on me after my mom said I needed to stop guilting them and figure out my own life like an adult. 2 days later, Jennifer called me absolutely ecstatic because our parents surprised her with a brand new BMW to replace her totaled car. Not used, not basic. A fully loaded BMW with leather seats and premium sound system. She sent me pictures of it sitting in our parents' driveway with a giant bow on top like some commercial. The price tag? $38,000. Cash. Not financed, not leased. They paid cash for a luxury car for someone who had just proven for the third time that she cannot be trusted behind the wheel of any vehicle. But somehow, my $500 medication copay request was too much to ask. When I called to confront them about this obvious double standard, My mother told me the situations were completely different. Jennifer needed reliable transportation to get to her court dates and community service, while I was just trying to get money for unnecessary medical appointments. My father added that Jennifer was going through a difficult time and needed their support, unlike me, who just complains about everything instead of taking responsibility for my own problems. I asked them point blank how Jennifer crashing 3 cars while drunk constitutes a difficult time that deserves a BMW, while my chronic medical condition requiring treatment makes me irresponsible. My mom's response was that Jennifer suffers in ways I don't understand and that I'm too selfish to see past my own minor issues to support my sister when she really needs family. That's when something clicked in my brain. Not anger, not hurt, pure clarity. I finally understood exactly where I stood in this family hierarchy and exactly what my parents thought of me compared to their precious Jennifer. I told them I understood their priorities now and hung up. I haven't spoken to them since, and honestly, I'm done trying to make sense of their logic. But here's what they don't know. I've been preparing for this moment for a lot longer than they realize. See, I'm not the irresponsible failure they think I am. I've been working steadily for 6 years. I own my condo outright, and I've been very carefully positioning myself for complete independence from them. Because unlike Jennifer, I actually learned how to handle my own problems. And unlike my parents, I remember every single slight, every dismissal, every time they chose her convenience over my actual needs. They want me to be a real adult who handles his own problems? Perfect. I'm about to show them exactly what that looks like. The interesting part is going to be watching what happens when they realize just how much they've been depending on their supposedly irresponsible son for things they've completely taken for granted. This is just the beginning. Update 1. Holy hell. You guys weren't kidding about families showing their true colors when you stopped playing their games. The response to my last post was incredible. Apparently, I'm not the only one dealing with golden child syndrome in toxic families. Shout out to everyone who shared their stories and advice, especially the commenter who said my parents would panic once they realized what they'd lost. You called it perfectly. So it's been exactly 9 days since I told my parents I understood their priorities and went completely silent. 9 days of not answering their calls, not responding to texts, and definitely not showing up for the family dinner my mom hosts every Sunday that I've attended religiously for the past 4 years. The first few days were blissful silence. I figured they were probably relieved not to deal with their dramatic, selfish son who dares to ask for help with medical bills. I used the time to finalize some arrangements I've been working on for months. More on that later. Then Wednesday happened. My phone started ringing at 7 in the morning. Mom calling. I ignored it. She called back immediately. And again. By the time I left for work, she'd called 16 times and left 8 voicemails that started concerned and ended with her practically screaming about how I was being ridiculous and needed to call her back immediately to work this out like adults. The texts were even better. She started with the usual guilt trip about how family doesn't abandon each other over money and how disappointed she was in my behavior. Then she escalated to saying I was punishing Jennifer for something that wasn't her fault and that my jealousy was tearing the family apart. By evening, she was demanding I explain what exactly I expected them to do differently and how my attitude was hurting everyone. Thursday brought my father into the mix. His approach was different, but equally predictable. He called twice and left 1 voicemail, saying we needed to discuss my unrealistic expectations and that my mother was upset about my childish behavior. His text messages were more direct. He wanted to know when I planned to stop this nonsense and start acting like a responsible adult again. But Friday was when things got really interesting. Jennifer called me. Now, Jennifer never calls me. We text occasionally about family stuff, but actual phone conversations? Maybe twice a year? So, when I saw her name on my screen at 2 in the afternoon, I knew my parents had sent her to do damage control. I answered because, honestly, I was curious how they'd coached her to handle this. Jennifer started with fake concern about how mom and dad were worried about me, and how they just wanted to make sure I was okay. She said they were confused about why I was upset and wanted to help fix whatever was wrong. When I didn't immediately cave and apologize, she switched tactics. She told me mom had been crying every day because she didn't understand what she'd done wrong, and dad was frustrated because he thought we'd moved past the money thing. Jennifer said she felt terrible that her situation had somehow caused problems between me and our parents. I asked her if she actually felt terrible enough to maybe consider getting a job and paying them back for the legal fees and car, or if she planned to stop driving drunk and putting other families at risk, or if she had any intention of taking responsibility for the chaos she'd caused. That's when the real Jennifer came out. She told me I was being completely unfair by bringing up her personal struggles when this was supposed to be about family communication. She said my money problems weren't their fault, and I couldn't blame her for mom and dad's financial decisions. She reminded me that she never asked for the BMW. They bought it because they love her and want her to be safe. The conversation went downhill fast. Jennifer accused me of being jealous of their relationship and trying to punish her for having supportive parents. She said my medical issues didn't give me the right to make everyone else miserable, and that I was being selfish by causing drama instead of just handling my own problems. I told her she was absolutely right. I should handle my own problems. Then I hung up. That evening, both parents called together on speakerphone. This was the conversation I'd been waiting years to have, and they had no idea what they were walking into. Dad opened by saying they'd talked to Jennifer and understood I was going through a difficult time, but my behavior was unacceptable and needed to stop immediately. He said family doesn't work this way, and I owed them an explanation for my attitude. Mom jumped in saying she'd been racking her brain trying to figure out what they'd done to deserve this treatment. She said they'd always supported both their children and couldn't understand why I was suddenly acting like they were terrible parents. I asked them if they genuinely couldn't see the difference between how they treat Jennifer versus how they treat me. Dad said, of course, there were differences. Jennifer was going through serious problems that required family support, while I was an independent adult with a good job who should be able to handle my own responsibilities. I asked him to explain how crashing 3 cars while drunk qualified as serious problems deserving a BMW, while chronic illness requiring medication qualified as personal responsibility deserving mockery. Mom said I was twisting their words and that Jennifer's struggles were different from my health issues. She said Jennifer was suffering emotionally and psychologically from her mistakes, while my medical situation was just routine maintenance that adults handle on their own. The conversation lasted almost 2 hours. They alternated between defending Jennifer's need for support, minimizing my health condition, and insisting they'd never treated us differently. Every time I brought up a specific example, the legal fees, the BMW, their response to my medication request, they had an explanation for why that situation was special and not comparable to anything else. By the end, Dad was telling me I needed to accept that Jennifer required more help right now and stop keeping score like a child. Mom added that my expectations were unreasonable and my jealousy was poisoning our family relationships. I told them I wasn't keeping score anymore. I was done playing this game entirely. That's when I shared some information they weren't expecting. See, what my parents don't realize is that over the past 6 years, I haven't just been working and saving money. I've been very carefully tracking exactly how much they depend on their supposedly irresponsible son for things they never acknowledge. For 4 years, I've been paying for their premium cable package and streaming services because I added them to my accounts when Dad complained about the costs. That's $180 monthly they don't budget for because it automatically comes out of my account. For 3 years, I've been covering Jennifer's car insurance because they asked me to add her to my policy when her rates went up after the first DUI. That's another $240 monthly that I've been absorbing without complaint. I've been paying the property taxes on their house for 2 years because they were struggling with the lump sum payment, and I offered to handle it monthly through my mortgage company. That's $950 monthly they don't have to worry about. And for the past 18 months, I've been quietly covering the HOA fees for their retirement community because Dad mentioned they were eating into his fixed income. That's $320 monthly they forgot they weren't paying. In total, I've been subsidizing their lifestyle to the tune of $1,690 every single month for years. Money they've gotten so accustomed to not paying that they don't even remember it comes from me. But here's the beautiful part. Every single one of those arrangements was set up as a temporary favor that I could cancel at any time. And the billing cycles all reset on the 15th of each month, which was yesterday. I didn't tell them any of this during our phone call. I just said I was handling my own problems now, exactly like they wanted. This morning, their internet got shut off. Their cable is gone. Jennifer's car insurance was canceled. Their property taxes are now delinquent and will start accruing penalties. And their HOA is going to start charging late fees that compound daily. My phone has been ringing non-stop since noon. I'm not answering. They wanted to see what happens when their adult son handles his own problems without depending on family support. Now they're going to learn what happens when they lose the family support they didn't even realize they had. Update 2. You guys, I cannot even begin to describe the absolute chaos that has erupted since I canceled their services. The comments on my last update were incredible. So many of you called exactly what would happen. And honestly, your predictions were spot on. The commenter who said they'd show up at my door within 48 hours? You win the prize for accuracy. It's been 4 days since their internet, cable, and Jennifer's car insurance got cut off. 4 days since their property taxes became delinquent and their HOA fees started accumulating penalties. The phone calls went from frequent to absolutely relentless, and when I continued ignoring them, they decided to escalate to in-person confrontations. Saturday morning at 8:30, I'm having coffee and reading Reddit updates when someone starts pounding on my front door. Not knocking, full-on aggressive pounding, like they're trying to wake the entire neighborhood. I look through my window and see my father's car in my driveway with both parents sitting inside, and Jennifer standing on my doorstep looking absolutely livid. I opened the door because, honestly, I'd been waiting for this moment for years. Jennifer immediately launched into me about how I was being completely unreasonable and needed to fix the insurance situation immediately because she had court dates she couldn't miss. She said canceling her coverage was illegal and could get her arrested. And how dare I put her legal situation at risk over some petty family disagreement? I asked her if she'd considered that maybe having 3 DUIs should disqualify her from driving altogether, regardless of insurance status. That's when my parents got out of the car and joined the confrontation on my doorstep. Dad started by demanding I explain what I thought I was accomplishing with these childish games. He said turning off their services was vindictive and cruel, especially when they were trying to work things out as a family. Mom chimed in saying she couldn't understand how I could be so heartless as to leave them without internet or television when they were already dealing with Jennifer's legal stress. She said elderly people rely on their routines, and I was deliberately making their lives harder out of spite. I told them they were absolutely right. I was making their lives harder, just like they made mine harder when they refused to help with my medical expenses while throwing money at Jennifer's consequences. Dad said those situations were completely different, and I knew it. He said Jennifer's problems required immediate family support while my medical issues were ongoing personal responsibilities that adults handle independently. He told me I was being manipulative by connecting two unrelated situations. I asked him to explain how Jennifer's third drunk driving incident deserved more family support than my chronic illness requiring medication to prevent permanent organ damage. Mom got emotional and said I was twisting everything to make them sound like terrible parents when they'd always done their best to support both children according to their different needs. She said Jennifer was struggling with addiction and mental health issues that required compassion, while I was stable and successful and should understand family priorities. This conversation went on for over an hour on my front porch, with neighbors definitely getting a show. They alternated between guilting me about abandoning family, defending their financial choices, and demanding I restore their services immediately. Every time I brought up the medical bill situation, they insisted it wasn't comparable to Jennifer's current crisis. Jennifer kept interrupting to say I was punishing her for having problems and that canceling her insurance could send her to jail if she got pulled over. She said she never asked me to pay for anything and couldn't control what our parents chose to spend money on. I told her she was right. She never asked me to pay for her insurance. I just did it when they asked me to help with her rising costs after her first DUI. Just like I paid for their cable, internet, property taxes, and HOA fees when they mentioned financial stress. Just like I've been quietly supporting their lifestyle for years, while they forgot those payments weren't coming from their own accounts. Dad said I was being ridiculous trying to make them feel guilty for accepting help I offered freely. He said if I wanted to cancel those services, that was my choice. But I couldn't use it as leverage to control their parenting decisions or family dynamics. That's when I shared some additional information that really got their attention. See, the canceled services were just the beginning. What they didn't know is that I'd been preparing for this confrontation much more thoroughly than just tracking monthly bills. 2 years ago, when Dad mentioned their retirement accounts had taken a hit and they were worried about their financial future, I helped them restructure their investments through my financial advisor. What I didn't mention is that all their accounts were set up with me as the co-signer and emergency contact, giving me full access to monitor their financial situation. 18 months ago, when they were stressed about potential medical expenses and Medicare gaps, I helped them set up a health savings account and added them to my supplemental insurance plan through my employer. Again, with me as the primary account holder and decision maker. Last year, when they were worried about their mortgage payments on their fixed income, I quietly took over their mortgage by refinancing it through my bank with better terms. The monthly payments come directly from my account, and while they think they're still making payments to their original lender, they're actually just making deposits into their own checking account that I've been monitoring. Over the past 3 years, I haven't just been paying some of their bills. I've systematically become the financial backbone holding their entire lifestyle together. They've been living in a house I own, spending money I provide, and using services I pay for, all while treating me like the irresponsible child who can't handle his own problems. But here's the really beautiful part. Every single one of these arrangements was structured as a temporary assistance that I could modify or terminate with 30 days' notice. And I'd already filed all the necessary paperwork before I went no contact. When I explained this to them on my doorstep, the entire dynamic of our conversation changed instantly. Dad immediately switched from angry demands to concerned negotiation. He said we could work out our family issues without involving financial arrangements that were separate from our personal disagreements. He suggested we all sit down calmly and figure out a solution that worked for everyone. Mom started crying and saying she had no idea I'd taken on so much responsibility for their finances. She said they never meant to become dependent on my help and just wanted to understand what I needed from them to fix this situation. Jennifer got very quiet and asked exactly what would happen if I terminated all these arrangements. When I explained that they'd lose their house, their healthcare coverage, and their financial stability within 30 days, she stopped talking about her insurance problems. The conversation lasted another 2 hours, with them alternating between trying to negotiate terms for restoring services and attempting to guilt me into backing down from what they called financial blackmail. I told them this wasn't blackmail. This was me handling my own problems independently, exactly like they'd always told me to do. If they wanted to maintain their current lifestyle, they needed to figure out how to pay for it themselves, just like I had to figure out how to pay for my medical expenses without family support. Dad asked what it would take for me to reconsider the financial arrangements. He said families work through disagreements without destroying each other's lives, and surely we could find a compromise that addressed my concerns while maintaining their stability. I told them I'd think about it and let them know my decision soon. They left looking shaken and confused, which honestly felt amazing after years of being treated like the family disappointment. But I'm not done yet. The financial pressure is just getting started and they have no idea what's coming next. Tomorrow is when the real fun begins. Final update. Reddit. I promised you the real fun would begin, and holy hell did it ever. The past week has been absolutely incredible to watch, and I mean that in the most satisfying way possible. Thank you to everyone who followed this saga and especially to those who called exactly how this would play out. You were right about everything. So after they left my house looking shaken, I gave them exactly 24 hours to think about their situation before I made my final move. 24 hours to consider what their lives would look like without my financial support, and whether their precious golden child favoritism was worth losing everything they'd built their retirement around. Monday evening at exactly 7 p.m., I called them. Not to negotiate, not to discuss terms, but to deliver my decision. Dad answered with this fake calm voice asking if I'd had time to think about our family situation and whether we could work something out that made sense for everyone. He said they understood I felt hurt by their financial priorities, but surely we could find a middle ground that didn't involve destroying family relationships. I told him I'd thought about it extensively, and I had indeed found a solution that made perfect sense. Then, I laid out exactly what was going to happen. Effective immediately, I was terminating every financial arrangement I had with them. The mortgage I'd been covering would revert to their responsibility within 30 days, meaning they'd need to come up with $2,800 monthly or face foreclosure. Their health insurance through my employer would be canceled, leaving them to navigate Medicare gaps and prescription costs on their own. The property taxes would become their problem again, with penalties and interest already accumulating. The HOA fees would continue compounding daily until paid in full. But here's where it got really interesting, and this is the part I'd been planning for over 2 years. See, when I helped them restructure their retirement accounts, I didn't just set myself up as co-signer and emergency contact. I also moved their investments into accounts that I controlled as the primary holder, with them listed as beneficiaries. What this meant is that I had legal authority to liquidate their assets, and they couldn't access their retirement funds without my approval. Dad immediately started arguing that those arrangements were illegal, and I couldn't control their money without their consent. He said they'd never agreed to give me that level of control over their finances. I reminded him that he'd signed all the paperwork himself 2 years ago when he was panicking about market volatility and asked me to handle their investments through my financial advisor. Every single document was legally binding and properly notarized. I'd been managing their entire financial portfolio for years, while they forgot they'd given me that authority. Mom got on the line crying about how they never imagined I would use their trust against them like this. She said they'd always been proud of my financial responsibility and never thought I'd punish them for accepting help they genuinely needed. I asked her if she remembered what she said when I asked for $500 to help with medication copays. She said I was being dramatic about some tests, while Jennifer had real problems that required family support. Mom tried to explain that Jennifer's situation was different, because addiction and legal problems create immediate crises that need family intervention. while chronic health conditions are manageable personal responsibilities that don't require emergency assistance. I told her she was absolutely right. Jennifer's problems were definitely more urgent and deserving of financial support, so I'd arranged for them to handle all their financial responsibilities independently, just like they expected me to handle my medical expenses. That's when Jennifer got on the phone screaming about how I was destroying their family over money and that I was being vindictive and cruel. She said they'd offered to work things out, but I was choosing to hurt innocent people instead of having an adult conversation about our differences. I asked Jennifer how her job search was going, since she'd need income to help support our parents through this transition. She said that wasn't fair because she was dealing with legal issues and couldn't commit to full-time employment while attending court dates and community service. She said I knew she was struggling with personal problems and couldn't take on additional responsibilities right now. I told her that sounded like a personal responsibility she'd need to figure out independently, just like they'd always told me to do. The conversation went on for almost 3 hours. They alternated between begging, threatening legal action, and trying to guilt me into reconsidering. Dad said I was destroying decades of family relationships over a single disagreement about money priorities. Mom said she couldn't understand how I could be so heartless toward people who loved me and had always done their best to support both children fairly. Jennifer kept saying I was punishing her for having problems and that canceling their financial support would hurt our parents more than it would hurt her. She said she never asked for preferential treatment and couldn't control how our parents chose to spend their money. Every time they tried to negotiate partial restoration of services or gradual transition timelines, I reminded them that they'd taught me to handle my own problems without depending on family support. I was simply applying their own philosophy to their situation. By the end of the call, Dad was promising they'd pay for my medication expenses and help with my medical bills if I'd reconsider the financial arrangements. He said they'd been wrong to refuse my request for assistance and wanted to make things right between us. I told him that that was a generous offer, but I'd already figured out how to handle my medical expenses independently, just like they'd always wanted me to do. Mom asked what it would take for me to change my mind. She said families forgive each other's mistakes and work together through difficult times, and surely there was some way to repair our relationship. I told them there was nothing to repair. I finally understood their priorities perfectly, and I was responding accordingly. They'd taught me that family members should handle their own problems, and I was helping them learn that lesson themselves. The call ended with them begging me not to destroy their lives over what Dad called a momentary lapse in judgment about family financial priorities. That was 6 days ago. Since then, my phone has been ringing constantly with increasingly desperate voicemails. Mom crying about how they can't afford their mortgage payments and don't know how to access their retirement funds. Dad demanding I stop this insanity before they lose their house. Jennifer screaming that I'm destroying innocent people and that this revenge has gone too far. But here's the beautiful part. I'm not answering because I'm too busy handling my own problems independently, just like they always told me to do. Yesterday was when reality really hit them. They received foreclosure notices, insurance cancellation letters, and demands for immediate payment on all their delinquent accounts. The accumulated fees and penalties have pushed their monthly obligations to over $4,200, which is more than their fixed income can cover. Dad left a voicemail saying they'd talk to lawyers about getting control of their investments back, but the legal fees alone would cost more than they have access to. He said they're willing to apologize and admit they made mistakes with Jennifer if I'll just restore their financial stability. Mom's message was even more desperate. She said they're looking at losing their house and their health care, and she doesn't understand how I can watch my own parents become homeless over a family disagreement. She said they raised me better than this, and can't believe I'd let my anger destroy people who love me. Jennifer's voicemail was the most satisfying. She said she finally understands that her legal problems aren't more important than my medical needs, and she's sorry they didn't take my health condition seriously. She said she'll get a job and pay them back for the BMW and legal fees if I'll just stop punishing our parents for her mistakes. But the thing is, I'm not punishing anyone. I'm just giving them exactly what they always said I needed: the opportunity to handle their own problems independently without depending on family support. This morning I got the voicemail I'd been waiting years to hear, all three of them together, with Dad speaking for the family. He said they understand now that they treated me unfairly and made Jennifer's problems a higher priority than my health needs. He said they were wrong to refuse help with my medical expenses while spending tens of thousands on Jennifer's consequences. He said they're sorry for dismissing my condition as dramatic and sorry for calling my needs unrealistic expectations. Then came the part that made all of this worth it. Mom said they realize now that they've been depending on my financial support for years, without acknowledging it or showing gratitude. She said they took my help for granted while treating me like the irresponsible child who needed to learn independence. And finally, Jennifer admitted that her problems were choices she made repeatedly, while my health condition wasn't something I could control or fix by making better decisions. She said she understands now that chronic illness requiring ongoing treatment is actually more serious than legal consequences from drunk driving. The voicemail ended with all of them begging me not to let them lose everything over mistakes they promised to fix. Dad said families forgive each other and work through problems together, and they just needed a chance to make things right. But here's the thing they still don't understand. I'm not interested in forgiveness or working through problems together. I spent years watching them prioritize Jennifer's convenience over my actual needs, and listening to them explain why her choices deserved support while my health condition deserved mockery. They had decades to treat me like family. Instead, they taught me that family members handle their own problems independently without depending on others for support. So that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm handling my own problems, and I'm letting them handle theirs. They wanted to see what happens when their adult son takes responsibility for his own life without family support. Now they're learning what happens when they lose the family support they never realized they had. I understand their priorities now, just like I told them I would. And my priority is making sure they get exactly what they always said I deserved. The character-building experience of figuring out their own problems without help from family members who should be handling their own responsibilities. The foreclosure proceedings start next week. Their insurance runs out at the end of the month. And Jennifer still doesn't have a job or any way to contribute to the financial crisis she helped create. But that's not my problem anymore. Those are their problems to solve independently, just like they always wanted. I'm done playing family with people who taught me that love is conditional on convenience, and support is reserved for the person who causes the most problems. They can figure out their own solutions now. I'll be over here handling my medical expenses and living my life exactly like they always told me to, independently and without bothering family members for help I don't deserve. Turns out I learned their lessons perfectly. I just applied them in ways they never expected.